From camping trips to sleepovers, urban legends have played a part in virtually every childhood. Every state has them and loves them, but Maine's urban legends are unique. From the dark and tragic to the unusually whimsical, these creepy stories from Maine make it very clear why most every Stephen King novel takes place here. To many, Maine is known for lobster, seafood, and lighthouses. But to those more curious about the history of the state, Maine is known as a hotbed for ghostly activity. Our next legend is truly spooky and combines both hauntings and lighthouses. Not far off the Maine coast is a small town of Pittsburgh and Popham Beach, and is one of the Maine's most historic lighthouses. The Seguin Island Light Station is Maine's tallest lighthouse, as well as being the second oldest. The lighthouse was commissioned by George Washington in 1795. It is rich in history, but holds a dark secret of murder and suicide. Our story begins sometime in the early 1800s. A keeper and his new wife were set to spend the winter isolated on Seguin Island. To try and help combat boredom, the caretaker had a piano shipped in to keep his wife occupied. He probably should have found out her level of expertise before buying the gift. Unfortunately, she only knew one song and played it over and over again. Finally, the caretaker could take no more and went a bit insane, destroying the piano with his axe. In a fit of rage, he turned the axe on his bride. The caretaker eventually took his own life, leaving the lighthouse unattended. Seeing something was not right at the lighthouse, people went to the island and made the gruesome discovery. The haunting of Seguin Island Lighthouse is no secret among sailors of the area. Today, reports continue that strange music is still heard coming from the island, and that the caretaker's wife still plays her song. Wood Island Light looks peaceful and beautiful above the rocky shores and crashing seas of the Atlantic, but things can be deceiving. Wood Island holds a dark secret. Howard Hobbs was renting a small piece of land on the island in 1896. Hobbs, like many people of the area, was a fisherman. One night, upon returning from the mainland drunk, he ran into his landlord, Frederick Milliken. Of course, with Hobbs being late paying his rent, the landlord took the opportunity to ask for the money. Still drunk from the night's exploits on the mainland, Hobbs got angry and pulled his gun on Milliken and shot him in the stomach, according to newspaper reports from that week. Horrified at what he had done, Hobbs helped carry the mortally wounded Milliken inside the lighthouse. The lighthouse keeper at the time was Thomas Orcutt. He went to Hobbs and told him to turn himself in. Still drunk, Hobbs took his gun and shot himself right there in the lighthouse. Since the murder-suicide, moaning and shadow figures have been reported by the various keepers that have lived in the lighthouse. In 1972, the light was removed and there was no longer a need to have keepers live on the site, but legends remained. If you are quiet enough and stand still enough, you will hear the ghosts of Hobbs and Milligan. Strange voices carried in the wind, footsteps echoing where there are no feet, and apparitions that really do go bump in the night. With all of Maine's amazing coastline, incredible wildlife, and breathtaking forest, in the small town of Bucktown, all of this natural beauty has taken a back seat to the town's greatest attraction. Colonel Jonathan Buck founded Bucktown, known today as Bucksport, in 1763 and was a well-known Revolutionary War hero. However, there are some dark things in his past that have followed him to his grave. During his time as Justice of the Peace, legends say Colonel Buck sentenced a woman to burn alive for witchcraft. Before she burned, it is said the woman placed a curse on him. A story published in 1902 in the New England magazine reads, All was ready and the hangman about to perform his gruesome duty when the woman turned to Colonel Buck and, raising one hand to the heaven as if to direct her last words on earth, pronounced this astounding prophecy. "Jonathan Buck, listen to these words, the last my tongue shall utter. It is the spirit of the only true and living God which bids me speak them to you. You will soon die. Over your grave they will erect a stone, that all may know where the bones of the mighty Jonathan Buck are crumbling to dust. But listen, listen all ye people. Tell it to your children and your children's children. Upon that stone will appear an imprint of my foot, and for a time, long, long after your accused race has perished from the earth, the people will come far and near, and the unborn generations will say, 'There lies a man who murdered a woman.' Remember well, Jonathan Buck. Remember well." Colonel Buck died in 1795, and in 1852 his grandchildren erected a monument near his gravesite. Not long after, a strange image appeared in the shape of a leg and a foot right under his name. Despite many attempts to remove this image, including replacing it, the leg image remained and is still seen today. With Maine's history dating back to colonial times, it's no wonder a few unruly spirits from the era still haunt the soil. The Revolutionary fort, Fort William Henry, still stands near the harbor. The fort was built in 1692 by the English to help defend against the French and Wacabi Confederacy of the Arcadia during the King William War. It stood for 4 years before being destroyed in the Siege of Pemaquid in 1696 and eventually rebuilt. During that time, a Native American chief was hung from the tree by the English. He is said to live in that same tree where he was hanged, and that his spirit still roams the area around the fort. There have been reports through the years from employees and visitors of a white orb outside the entrance that travels between the reconstructed building to the area where the chief is believed to have been hanged. Others have reported feeling an eerie cold in the area. Pocomoonshine Lake in Washington County, Maine holds a lake monster. According to legends, the Algonquin Indians of Maine have seen this monster in the lake for centuries. Stories say that the monster is a result of a disagreement between the Algonquin shaman and the chief of the Micmac. The chief is said to have turned into a large serpent, which the shaman vanquished and tied to a tree next to the lake. Because the serpent creature is about 60 feet long, it has been seen swimming in the lake, but is not confined to the water like most of its kind. The Pocomoonshine Lake monster has been reported to leave the lake from time to time. A sawmill owner in 1882 claimed to have seen the trail where the monster dragged its gigantic body across land. He said the trail was 4 feet wide and 3 feet deep. People still report seeing the serpent in and around the lake. Along the waters and riverbanks of the Penobscot River, in the town of Westbrook, Maine, a new legend has been born, and its name is Wessie. Since June of 2016, reports have been coming in of a large snake being seen in and around the river. The first report at Riverbank Park describes the creature as long as a truck with the head the size of a soccer ball. A week later, police were patrolling the park. They spotted a large snake feasting on what looked like a beaver. They estimated the snake to be about 10 feet long. Throughout that summer, there were a few more sightings. Then one day, evidence to prove the snake's existence was found. A large snake skin was found near a boat launch in the park area. Local police sent the skin to the University of Texas at Tyler to be tested to find out what kind of snake it was. John Plasick Jr., the biology professor who tested the skin, confirmed that it belonged to a green anaconda. So how did an anaconda make it all the way north from the warmer Amazon? Did it survive the cold, harsh winters of Maine? Experts believe that Wessie is no more after those winters. With an author resident who writes some of the creepiest books out there, it should come as no surprise that Maine has its share of hauntings to talk about. In our next legend, we are headed to the University of Southern Maine to talk about the Robi-Andrews Dorm. This creepy legend just might baffle you some. Built in the 1800s, the Robi-Andrews Dorm is the oldest building on the Gorham campus. During its time there have been many stories about suicide and murder, and it seems many of these victims are still haunting the dorm. Our first legend of Robi-Andrews Dorm is of a young woman whose boyfriend left her after finding out she was pregnant. Devastated and not knowing any other option, she hung herself on the 4th floor of the dorm. Since then, there have been reports of her ghost roaming the hallways. Our next legend of Robi-Andrews Dorm is the most mysterious. Legends say there was a young woman that became homesick at a time when you couldn't just pick up the phone to call home. Letters were the only way to communicate with loved ones. According to an article from the USM Free Press, the young woman had sent several letters home to her parents without a response. She became very homesick and distraught, so she started crawling into the belfry and calling out for her parents. Now here is the mysterious part. The young woman, somewhere along the line, either fell out of the tower or, more disturbingly, was pushed. Reports say she also roams the hallways. Students past and present have reported strange, unexplainable cold spots in the building and have heard footsteps and furniture being moved on the 4th floor, even though the attic had been closed off for students for years. Some also have reported seeing the apparitions of the young women. Located in Camden, Maine, is one of the most beautiful summits, rivaled only by the majestic forest you have to travel through to get there. Unfortunately, it's not all gorgeous views and lush vegetation here. There is a tragic story that explains why you might hear phantom whispers and distant screams when you get to the top. Camden Hill State Park was created in the 1930s and overlooks the Penobscot Bay in Camden, Maine. With over 5,000 acres and 30 miles of hiking trails, the area is also known for Mount Batty and Mount Menegoncook. Mount Batty has a plaque at the peak commemorating a poem written by Edna St. Vincent Millere called Resistance. Unfortunately, the mount is also known as a meeting area for the Ku Klux Klan. The other large peak in Camden Hill State Park is Mount Menegoncook, which is visited by tourists from all over the country just to catch a glimpse of the famous Maiden's Cliff Trail, which is dedicated to a young girl who lost her life too soon. On May 7, 1864, a church congregation was on a trip around the countryside. On this trip was a 12-year-old girl named Eleanor French. Fascinated by all the tall peaks of Mount Menegoncook, the group decided to climb to the top and take in the beautiful views. While exploring the peaks, the wind took hold of Eleanor's hat. Determined to catch it, she tried to scale the rocks. Nobody even realized she was gone until it was too late. Eleanor fell over 300 feet to the rocks below. The group was able to reach her, and surprisingly, she was still alive. But before they could leave the peak, she died from her injuries. To this day, visitors report feeling overwhelming grief and sadness near the peak of Maiden's Cliff. There have also been reports of apparitions of a hat and a young girl chasing it and then falling off the cliff. Also, there is an unexplainable mist that hovers over the area and carries the screams of Eleanor as she plummets to her death time and time again. While there are numerous haunted places in Maine, One of the most haunted is said to be a lonely stretch of Route 2 in the northern part of the state. This particular stretch runs through what's known as Haynesville Woods. Before the construction of Interstate 95, Route 2 was used mostly by truck drivers hauling potatoes out of Maine. This isolated stretch of road is very dangerous, especially in the winter. It has one really sharp turn, almost 90 degrees. The road is not only famous for being haunted, it also gained notoriety through a song written by a former truck driver who became a country singer and songwriter, Duck Curlis. The song is titled A Tombstone Every Mile and refers to the many fatal accidents that occurred on this road. Because of these accidents, many people have reported seeing apparitions along the road, as well as many other strange occurrences. Today, the road is referred to as one of the most haunted places in Maine. The most popular story is of a frozen bride. In this story, a young bride and her husband were driving along Route 2 on a really cold winter's day when they hit a patch of black ice. They slid off the road and hit a utility pole. The husband died upon impact, but the bride was thrown from the car and survived, at least until she froze to death. Many people have reported seeing the bride walking along the side of the road, clutching her arms, staring straight ahead. When she is offered a ride, she wordlessly enters the car. As the car approaches the end of Haynesville Woods, the woman vanishes. Another version of the Haynesville Hitchhiker tells of a woman on her way to a party wearing a white dress. Along the way, her car got a flat tire, and while she was attempting to change it, she was struck and killed by a hit-and-run driver. Her dress, a red ribbon, and lace were found on the road, but there were no signs of her body. Legends say that on foggy nights, a woman in a white dress can be seen walking on the side of the road, and if you speed up to catch her, she speeds up also. A variation to this version tells of a red flashing light seen in the distance. As it approaches you, a white cloud floats over your vehicle, and the red flashing light disappears. The final legend of Route 2 tells of a female child walking alongside the road. When offered a ride, the child wordlessly gets in and a short time later disappears. Some locals claim that the child ghost is of a young girl killed by a tractor-trailer while walking alongside Route 2. While this exact story has not been confirmed, town records do reveal 2 10-year-old girls died in Haynesville on the exact same day in August of 1967. Whether or not it's related to the sightings of a young spirit seen, one thing is for certain: this lonely stretch of road in northern Maine has gained a reputation as being one of the most haunted places in Maine. One of the creepier urban legends to come out of Maine is said to have happened not too long ago, possibly the 1990s. The legend says a group of teens dared a friend to be lowered into the haunted Sabbattus well, which sits at the back of a cemetery. The teen agreed, and the group lowered him down, sitting on a rubber tire. They let him there for several minutes until they could no longer see him. When the friends realized there was no movement at the end of the rope, they pulled him back up. What they found was not the same boy they lowered into that dark, creepy well. The boy's hair had turned white and his whole body shook. He was unable to form any coherent words, and his laughter indicated that he had gone insane during those few minutes in the well. The boy never recovered and is said to now be in the county mental institution, where he randomly screams from the windows. What happened in that well? What could the boy have possibly seen to make him go mad in such a short time?